Hello dolls and welcome back to Vlogmas Day 17. Today I have another Muses episode for you, and today we're going to talk about a woman who ran away from home at only 14 to a foreign country to fulfill her dreams. Welcome to the life of Anna Karina. As with every part of the Vlogmas videos, I have a little giveaway for you as well today. Today I'm giving away these 3 vintage tights. They're all still in their original packaging, sealed. There's this one, and this one. All of these are still sealed. They're a size 44-46 European, one is 40-42, so that is on the border of small to medium, I'd say. But yeah, you can obviously also just use them as decor pieces. So if you want to know how to enter, stay till the end of the video. But now, without any more talking, welcome to Anna Karina, a life in frames. Before there was a camera in front of her, before there was Godard, before there were magazine covers and movie posters, there was just a girl with a name that did not yet belong to the world. Hanne Karin Bayer. A child born into war and uncertainty, into absence and longing, into a home that never quite felt like one. She had the kind of face that seemed to belong somewhere else, not in a small apartment in Copenhagen, not in the sharp voices of adults, not in the ache of foster homes and closed doors. Her eyes were too large, too searching, too full of questions that had nowhere to go. She grew up feeling misplaced, as if she had been sent to the wrong life by mistake. And so she learned early how to imagine another one. She imagined ships, cities, film frames, voices in other languages. She imagined Paris before she ever even knew how to say its name properly. She imagined being seen differently, loved differently, chosen. The cinema became her refuge long before she ever stepped into one of its dreams. She did not come from glamour. She came from silence, from bruises, from the weight of being unwanted. Yet somehow, out of that loneliness, she carried a kind of light that the world could not help but notice. This is not just the story of a new wave icon or a director's muse. It is the story of a girl who ran away from everything she had ever known and, against all odds, turned herself into an image that time could not forget. This is Anna Karina, before the legend, before the revolution, before the camera ever whispered her name. Chapter 1. Born Between Departures. Anna Karina began her life under a different name in another language, in a city that never quite felt like home. She was born as Hanne Karin Bayer on September 22, 1940, in Copenhagen, and as war was reshaping Europe, her small world was defined by absences. Her father, a ship's captain, left the family when she was still a baby. Her mother ran a clothing shop, practical, busy, not always emotionally available. For a time, stability came from elsewhere. Hanne lived with her maternal grandparents until about the age of 4. Then came foster homes, 4 more years of being placed and replaced, before returning at 8 to live with her mother and a violent stepfather. Home was not as much a place as it was a tension in the air. Her mother criticized her looks, telling her that her eyes and forehead were too big. Later, Anna would say she grew up with, quote, a terrible need to be loved, because she felt fundamentally unwanted and not very well loved. She ran away repeatedly, trying to reach boats that might take her away. Quote, I wanted to go anywhere else, she later said. Sweden, America, just not stay where I was. School offered little refuge. She rarely went. When she did well, too well for some. When she passed her exams with good marks, her teachers accused her of cheating. The injustice stung, and so at 14, she walked out and didn't look back. She took whatever work she could find, a lift operator in a department store, an assistant to an illustrator. At the edges of the film world in Denmark, she appeared as an extra. Then, on the street, director Ib Schmedes spotted her and cast her as the lead in his short film The Girl with Shoes, which would later win a prize at Cannes. But things at home grew more dangerous. One night, after her stepfather beat her badly during a row, she made a decision. With the equivalent of about 15 euros pressed into her hand by her grandfather, the 14-year-old girl left Copenhagen behind. She struck out her thumb, hitchhiked south, and aimed for the city that had lived in her imagination for years. Paris. Chapter 2. The Girl and Les Deux Magots. She arrived in Paris in the summer of 1958, 17 years old, almost broke, speaking barely any French. She made her way to the Champs-Élysées, where she asked priests for help. One young priest eventually found her a tiny room on Rue Pavée in Marais. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Money was scarce and food scarcer. She wandered the city, hungry and dazzled, taking in the streets she had only known from films and books. One day, her footsteps carried her to the Saint-Germain-des-Prés and into the Café Les Deux Magots, a place mythologized by Sartre and the post-war intellectuals. She sat down, just another young woman at a table, when a stranger approached. The woman was Catherine Elle, a modeling agent. She asked if Hanne would like to pose for photographs. Quote, "I thought she was crazy," Anna later laughed. "Everybody said that in Paris. Come, we'll make photos," and was never serious. But when she found out the job was a professional shoot for Jour de France, she agreed. The shoot went well. At the end, Catherine told her, not unkindly, that she wasn't very talented as a model, but handed her a list of contacts anyway. It was one of those small, almost casual gestures that alters the course of an entire life. And Catherine was wrong. Within a short time, the girl from Copenhagen was working regularly. She posed for advertising, campaigns, fashion spreads, and magazines. Poverty gave way to precarious independence. She was still on the edge, still young, still learning French word by word. But Paris, at last, seemed to be letting her in. "I didn't speak French," she said. "I learned it in the cinema. I spent all day watching films, sometimes 3 times, until I understood." Chapter 3. You Will Be Anna Karina. And then one job changed everything. Hanne was booked for a shoot with Elle, the influential French magazine run by Hélène Lazareff. On set that day, she met Coco Chanel. Chanel looked at the young model with the enormous eyes and asked what she wanted to do with her life. "I want to be an actress," Hanne told her. It was the same dream she'd had as a child in Denmark when drama school still seemed impossibly far away. Chanel then asked her name. "Hanne Karin Bayer," she replied. "You can't possibly become an actress with a name like that," Chanel said. "It's not a name for an actress." And by the end of the session, the designer had rechristened her Anna Karina, a name deliberately echoing Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. She told me, "You'll be Anna Karina. It sounds better on poster." From that moment on, the girl from Copenhagen had a new identity, one that seemed already written in cinema letters. Advertisements followed for Coca-Cola, Pepsodent, Palmolive. In one Palmolive commercial, she lay in a bathtub covered to the neck in foam, looking both playful and enigmatic. The ad would travel far beyond the world of soap and bathrooms. One day, a young critic turned director named Jean-Luc Godard would see it and imagine her naked under the bubbles. She wasn't. She always wore a bathing suit. But that misperception would spark one of the most defying collaborations of 1960s cinema. In the meantime, she was still underage, still learning French. She had enough money to move into a small apartment off the Champs-Élysées. She spent her days in darkened cinemas, watching French films on repeat until she understood the language. Movies became her classroom, the screen her instructor. The shy Danish runaway was transforming herself. The name Coco Chanel had given her began to fit. Anna Karina was nearly ready to walk into the frame. Chapter 4. Telegrams, soap bubbles, and a note under the table. Jean-Luc Godard first encountered Anna, not in person, but on screen, in that very Palmolive ad. At the time, he was casting for his feature, Breathless, and needed someone to play a small role as an old girlfriend of Jean-Paul Belmondo's character. He sent her a telegram asking her to come to the producer's office. When she arrived, Godard, behind dark glasses, told her she had the role, but added one condition. Anna was bristled. She told him that she didn't want to take her clothes off. "But I saw you in that soap ad," he argued. She snapped back. "You're crazy. I was wearing a swimsuit. The bubbles covered me. It's you who imagined me naked." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I have a little personal story to add here. I used to be a prop master, and film sets are still very male-dominated. So you would usually have, if a crew is like 50 people, 35 are men, if not more, probably 40. And so there aren't a lot of women working on set. And at some point while I was working, must have been 2018 or 19, there was a new rule. And that was that when you were shooting a nude scene or a sex scene, at least one person of every gender involved needed to be in that room. So if there was a sex scene between a man and a woman, at least one more man and one more woman needed to be there with them. And because I was working in props, and that is something where you are very hands-on, very close to the actors and very involved, and I got along with everyone well, I was usually the second woman. So I laid under several beds for sex scenes and nothing ever happened. But this is just a fun anecdote of my life. But it's trying to prevent what happened to Anna. Because Anna was in that room alone with all these men who were a lot older and asked her to take her clothes off, and she knew that this was a great career opportunity. Jean-Luc Godard Breathless is a film that is an absolute classic. There's actually another episode in this Muse series about Jean Seberg, who was so intertwined with that film. That film became her redemption, but I just want to say that I feel so deeply for her, because imagine how scary it is knowing that this is such an opportunity, but you don't feel comfortable. And I think it is very impressive that even at that young age, she stood up against those men. The part disappeared from Breathless, but Godard didn't forget her. Later in 1959, after finishing his breakthrough film, he sent another telegram. This time he said it was for the principal role in his new film, Le Petit Soldat. At the audition, he looked her over and said, quote, "You're right for the part. We'll sign the contract tomorrow." The film, he explained, was political, about the Algerian war. "I don't know anything about politics," she admitted. "All you have to do is what I tell you," he replied. But there were practical problems. She was still a minor, her mother is still in Copenhagen, and still angry about her departure, would need to sign the contract. On the phone, her mother initially hung up on her. A second call persuaded her to come to Paris. She arrived the next day, signed, and then left again. The film, shot in Geneva in 1960, cast Anna as Veronica Dreyer, a pro-Algerian militant. Set against the ongoing war, it was immediately censored in France and shelved for years. On set, Godard was often distracted, calling off shooting days because he had no ideas. Others noticed how much time he spent looking at Anna. She remembered an intensity of eye contact across the set, a feeling of something unspoken building. One evening, during dinner at Lausanne with the entire crew, she sat on one side of the table, her boyfriend on the other, and Jean-Luc between them. Under the table, Anna felt a hand take hers and press something into it. Jean-Luc Godard then left abruptly. In the next room, she uncurled her fingers and read the note. "Je vous aime. Rendez-vous au Café de la Paix à minuit. I love you. Meet me at the Café de la Paix at midnight." Her boyfriend followed, grabbed the paper, and pleaded with her not to go, but by then she had already realized that she too was deeply in love with him. She went to the cafe all the same. He was sitting there with a newspaper in front of him. When he finally lowered it, she knew she had crossed the line. She could never step back over. From then on, they were together. When Le Petit Soldat wrapped, Godard drove her back to Paris. He asked her where he could leave her, and she told him he couldn't, that she had no one else in the world but him. She moved into his hotel shortly after and then found them an apartment to stay together. They wandered through Paris at night, sometimes on foot, sometimes by car, going to the cinema, visiting friends, disappearing into the city together, like two fugitives from an ordinary life. They bought 2 dogs and named them Pouce Pouce Blanc and Pouce Pouce Noir. It was the happiest period of their relationship, a brief, intoxicating calm before life and art began pulling them apart. Chapter 5. A Woman is a Woman. Fame and Fracture. Even in those early days, their temperaments were already clashing. His jealousy, her deep-rooted loneliness. Godard wanted her to stop acting. She, having fought so hard to reach this world, wasn't about to give up. When director Michel Deville offered her a leading role in the comedy Ce Soir ou Jamais, she took it. Godard dismissed the script as trivial, a silly little comedy as he called it. But when he saw the rushes, he realized how luminous she was on screen and decided to build his next film around her. That film became Une femme et une femme, a playful, formally inventive musical set in everyday Paris. Anna played Angela, a striptease artist desperate for a baby, opposite Jean-Claude Brialy and Jean-Paul Belmondo. The shoot, however, mirrored the emotional turbulence of their relationship. Jean-Claude later described their union as tortured. Quote, "They tore each other apart, argued, loved each other, hated each other, screamed at each other." Godard had originally conceived the project as light-hearted. He rewrote during filming and it became more personal, its emotional nods echoing those of their real life. Off-screen, life moved quickly. Anna became pregnant. Jean-Luc insisted to marry, and they did so twice. First in Switzerland on March 3rd of 1961, and then 3 weeks later in Paris for friends and the press. Agnes Varda took photographs of the second ceremony and later cast them together briefly in Cléo de 5 à 7. Sundays were spent playing cards with Varda and Jacques Demy, nights visiting friends and clubs. Yet Godard seemed uncomfortable in company, often silent. Quote, he didn't talk much, Anna recalled. He would disappear into the Cahiers du Cinéma offices or go for a cigarette and just not return for days. Anna, newly married and newly famous, found herself alone in their apartment, waiting for the telephone to ring. And then tragedy struck. One night, when Godard came home, he found her bleeding and in distress. She had miscarried. She was rushed to the hospital. Her health was fragile. Jean-Luc Godard, unable to cope, withdrew even further. My heart breaks for her. This reminds me a lot of when Marianne Faithfull lost the child that she was carrying, Mick Jagger's child, and how he also turned inward. And it is really hard to say how one would react in this situation, and I understand that everyone grieves differently, but as someone who has lost a child before, it's one of the most harrowing things that can happen to you. It is so heartbreaking, it is so hurtful, and my heart just breaks for her and the thought that she had to go through this all by herself because she did not have a family or anyone to lean on besides him. After she was discharged, friends looked after her, while Jean-Luc Godard vanished again. He briefly tried to make amends by renting a villa in the south of France for a holiday, but then turned the car around on the way, saying he had too much work. Professionally, however, Une Femme et une Femme was a breakthrough for her. At the 1961 Berlin Film Festival, both she and the film won prizes. For international audiences, this was their first glimpse of Anna Karina. A critic called her an incontestable natural, outshining even seasoned actors. She won the Silver Bear for Best Actress. I didn't expect it, she said later. Suddenly, people recognized me in the street. It was strange because inside, I still felt very shy. The box office results were less enthusiastic, and the new wave directors soon came under attack in the French press. Godard struggled to finance his next projects, but Anna did not intend to wait. Chapter 6. Love, Jealousy, and the Camera's Gaze. In September of 1961, Anna began filming Le Soleil dans l'œil with director Jacques Bourdon and her co-star Jacques Perron. On set, she fell in love with her co-star and told Godard she intended to leave him and marry the younger actor. The argument that followed was explosive. Jean-Luc Godard returned to their apartment and destroyed their possessions in rage. That night, devastated, Anna swallowed an overdose of barbiturates. Jacques found her, called an ambulance, and she was rushed to the hospital. Quote, I didn't want to live anymore, she later admitted. It was all too much. Newspapers reported that the couple would divorce and that she would marry Jacques. But early in 1962, the story changed again. Jean-Luc Godard and Anna Karina reconciled. He cast her in Vivre sa vie, conceived in part as a showcase for her talent, and in part as a way of holding on to her. In Vivre sa vie, she played Nana, a young woman who drifts into prostitution and meets a tragic end. Shot in stark black and white with long takes and documentary-like detachment, the film hinges on her performance, her bobbled hair, her face alive with thought, her steady gaze in the famous cafe scenes. It became one of the great roles of the new wave. Outside Godard's films, she began to pursue theater. Jacques Rivette adapted Denis Diderot's La Religieuse, The Nun, and after dining with Anna and Jean-Luc, realized she was perfect for the lead. Producer Georges de Beauregard doubted that Anna, with her Danish accent, could convincingly play an 18th century French nun. She took intense dictation lessons to prove him wrong. Quote, I worked like mad, she said. I didn't want anyone to say I couldn't do it. When the film struggled to find funding due to its subject matter, Jean-Luc Godard himself paid for a stage adaptation at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. Anna's performance was widely praised and prize-winning. Meanwhile, Jean-Luc moved from project to project. He worked on several short films, then Le Mépris, Contempt in 1963, a corrosive portrait of a crumbling marriage set against the film industry. Contempt was starring Brigitte Bardot, but the emotional template was Anna. Many of Brigitte's lines came from things Anna herself had said to Jean-Luc. In one scene, Brigitte wears a dark wig similar to Anna's hair. In Vivre sa vivre, Godard even coached her to walk like Anna. Brigitte later felt that she could never build her own relationship with the director. He was too fixated on his wife. Their possessive love often spilled into public scenes. In Rome, during a night out while Le Mépris was being shot, Anna accepted a dance with a stranger. When she returned to the table, Godard slapped her in front of everyone. She later interpreted the act through the lens of their destructive passion. Quote, It was mad love, jealousy, revenge. We adored each other. We were passionate, but there were crises of jealousy. By the mid-1960s, Anna Karina's face had become one of the most defying images of the new wave, and the camera's gaze on her was inseparable from the tangled relationship behind it. Chapter 7: Running, Dancing, Falling, the 1960s in Motion. In late 1963, their relationship shattered again. Anna, working constantly, had affairs, and Godard reacted with fury and despair. At one point, she attempted suicide once more, and was found only because an Italian painter working in their home came back unexpectedly to retrieve his keys. Godard had her admitted to a psychiatric clinic. It was like a bad dream, she said, but in the clinic, for the first time, I spoke about the baby I lost. Until then, I hadn't really faced it. When he picked her up, he told her they would begin filming for a new film in 3 days. I wonder whether he was just in love with her picture and not with who she was, because it really feels like he loved her in his movies. He loved to look at her, but he didn't really like to be with her. And I wonder whether he was so infatuated with her because of these roles that she played for him, because essentially he wrote roles for her that she then filled for him. But whenever she was herself around him, that is when they fought. That film was Bande à Pas, adapted from an American crime novel. Anna played Odile, the shy, impulsive girl who falls into a crime plot with 2 young men, Franz and Arthur. The film gave her some of her most iconic moments: the 3-person Madison dance in the cafe, the record-breaking run through the Louvre, and fragile charm she exuded in every scene. She was in a fragile state during filming. Quote, "I had come out of hospital," she remembered. "It was a painful moment. I had lost the taste for life. I wasn't well in my head or in my body. This film saved me." After Bande à Pas, she continued working with other directors and had an affair with Maurice Ronet, further straining her marriage. Jean-Luc Godard and Anna Karina separated and filed for divorce. Yet they weren't done with one another professionally. They made Alpha Will, a sci-fi noir in which she played Natascha von Braun opposite Eddie Constantine's Lemmy Caution. Shot in contemporary Paris, but framed as a futuristic city dominated by a tyrannical computer, the film is full of Godard's anxieties about language, control, and emotion. Natascha, taught in Alpha Will that words like love no longer exist, learns them again from Lemmy. Godard poured his desires into this. "Say I love you," Lemmy tells her. "I don't know what it means," she answers. The scene played like wish fulfillment, a man trying to teach a woman to say "I love you," hoping the words might bring her back. Their divorce became final on December 21st, 1964, days before shooting on Alpha Will had begun. Even so, witnesses recalled that their affection seemed still alive on set. By the time they made Pierrot le Fou, however, their collaboration had curdled into open bitterness. Loosely adapted from Lionel White's novel Obsession, the film traces the doomed, colorful escapade of Ferdinand and Marianne, a couple on the run through a pop art version of the south of France. On set, Anna and Jean-Luc could barely speak to each other. Belmondo said they were, quote, like a cobra and a mongoose, always glaring at each other. In one exchange, Anna asked, "What should I do?" And Godard replied, "You have a mouth to talk with, don't you?" Out of this misery came one of their greatest films, a wild, melancholic, visually stunning breakup letter written in saturated color. Anna's Marianne is charming, restless, and finally lethal, a living embodiment of the chaos that both attracted and destroyed him. Within a few short years, in film after film, Anna Karina and Jean-Luc Godard had built one of cinema's most famous director and muse relationships, and demolished it in the same breath. "Of course he was the great love of my life," she would later say, "but that doesn't mean it was easy." I think they had a really classic toxic relationship because when things were good, they were really, really good. But when things were bad, they were incredibly bad. And obviously their relationship was made so much more difficult by the fact that they were working together and the fact that during the work, he had so much power over her. The director does have a lot of power over the actors, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just the way that making a film works. But I think if you're also dating the director, that always puts you in a power dynamic that doesn't work for a relationship, at least not for a healthy one. Chapter 8: Beyond the Nouvelle Vague. It would be a mistake to reduce Anna Karina's story to Godard's muse. Even in the 1960s, her work stretched far beyond his films. she collaborated again with Jacques Rivière on La Religieuse, playing Suzanne Simonin, a young woman forced into a convent and subjected to cruelty and manipulation. Her performance, vulnerable and dignified, anchored the film. The French government initially banned it, citing religious offense, until a public campaign, supported by new wave directors including Godard and Chabrol, led to its eventual release. President de Gaulle himself intervened to lift the ban. "I was very proud of that film," she said. "It was hard work, but Suzanne is a beautiful character, fragile and strong at the same time." She took roles in international productions, like Volker Schöndorff's Michael Kohlhaas in 1969. The films varied in quality, but critics continued to single out her performances. Music was another thread running through her 1960s life. In 1967, she starred in Anna, a pop musical written by Serge Gainsbourg and directed by Pierre Corlanic for French television. Serge wrote several songs especially for her. Sous le soleil extractement and Roller Girl became her signature hits, and she performed them on TV throughout the era. Quote, "Serge wrote marvelous things for me," she remembered. "I loved singing his songs. They were playful, but also very melancholic." Her private life moved on as well. After divorcing Jean-Luc Godard, she married scriptwriter and actor Pierre Fabre in 1968. Their relationship would last until the early 1970s. In 1973, she took her career into her own hands again by moving behind the camera. She wrote, produced, directed, and starred in Vivre Ensemble, a contemporary story of a free-spirited woman and the bourgeois professor who falls into her orbit, losing his job and sliding into her world of drugs and bohemian chaos. The film premiered at Cannes Critics Week. It received mixed reviews, but François Truffaut praised it for its honesty and its snapshot of a changing era. By the mid-1970s, a new group of European directors had emerged. Rainer Werner Fassbinder, the prolific German filmmaker, cast Anna in Chinese Roulette, a psychologically tense drama about betrayal, cruelty, and truth games in a country house. Her presence, reserved and enigmatic, suited his cold, precise style. The roles in this period were varied: serious art films, television thrillers, light comedies, literary adaptations. Her face remained recognizable, but she was no longer the girl of the café dance and the Parisian streets. She was a woman in her 30s and 40s, navigating an industry that was often less generous to actresses as they aged. Chapter 9: Stages, Songs, and Stories. From the late 1970s onward, Anna Karina increasingly divided her time between cinema, theater, music, and writing. She returned to the stage in the 80s and gave praised performances in an adaptation of Ingmar Bergman's After the Rehearsal, showing how naturally her intensity translated to live theater. Her personal life continued to change. After divorcing Pierre Fabre in 1974, she married actor and director Daniel Duval in 1978. They divorced in 1981. In 1982, she married director Dennis Barry, with whom she would share the rest of her life. Cinema offered fewer major roles, but she continued to choose interesting and often challenging projects in the 80s and 90s, moving fluidly between art film and occasional television work. At the same time, her musical life deepened. She performed at the Paris club Le Palace before recording an album with Philippe Catherine, which she released in 2000 and followed by a concert tour in France and abroad. Many of the songs she had originally performed in films were later gathered and re-released in special collections. She also adapted two of Hans Christian Andersen's stories into musical works for children, collaborating with a new generation of artists, a return in a way to her Danish roots. Alongside this, she published several French-language novels. Her later film appearances often played on her status as a living symbol of the Nouvelle Vague, appearing briefly in work of directors who admired her legacy. In 2007, she wrote and directed a musical road film shot in Canada. By then, Anna Karina was no longer simply a star of the 1960s, but a lasting presence in European art cinema, constantly shifting between image, voice, and story. Chapter 10: Souviens-toi, the last frames. In the final decade of her life, Anna Karina became increasingly an object of tribute, but she was also still an active participant in how she wanted to be remembered. In 2017, Dennis Barry directed a documentary about her, Anna Karina, Souviens-toi, which screened at the Lumière Festival in Lyon, where she was a guest of honor. She appeared at retrospectives, festivals, and special screenings, reflecting on her past with a mixture of humor and distance. Quote, "I don't live in nostalgia," she insisted, "but I'm happy people still love those films." In 2009, she presented a restored version of one of her most iconic films at Cannes and was honored later that year in Copenhagen for the 50th anniversary of the French New Wave, a full-circle moment in the country she had once run away from. In 2018, a still of her alongside Jean-Paul Belmondo was chosen as the official Cannes poster, and restored versions of her work were screened once more. That year, she also released a new album, revisiting songs from across her career, and traveled to Tokyo to perform. She often said that seeing her younger self on posters and screens felt strangely distant, like looking at a reflection that no longer fully belonged to her. In September of 2019, she attended a stage adaptation of one of her films and a tribute held in her honor. She remained present, curious, and attentive to the cinematic echoes of the life she had lived. On December 14th, 2019, Anna Karina died in Paris, reportedly from complications following an operation. Her family publicly denied reports that she had died of cancer. She was 79 years old. Her funeral took place on December 21st at Père-Lachaise Cemetery, in the presence of fellow artists like Léa Seydoux, Jane Birkin, and Marion Cotillard. She was buried in Division 49. 18 months later, Denis Barry was laid to rest in the same grave. Tributes continued into the next decade. In 2020, the César Award unveiled their poster, a photograph of Anna Karina, taken by Georges Dambier in 1959 for Elle. Another image, another echo. In Paris metro stations, posters for the two Godard retrospective used her face again to represent an entire movement in film history. Anna Karina's life can be told as a series of escapes and transformations. A child who felt unwanted and ran from home, a teenager who hitchhiked to Paris with almost no money, a model renamed by Coco Chanel, a young woman who refused to undress for a director, then became his central actress, his partner, his obsession. A performer who survived miscarriages, suicide attempts, jealous rages, and the volatility of 1960s fame. In the 1960s, she became the face of a cinematic revolution, the girl dancing in the café, the nun in Crisis, the runaway in Pierrot le Fou, the woman staring straight into the camera in Vivre sa vie. Her eyes seemed to carry everything: shyness, mischief, sadness, defiance, often all at once. But her story didn't end with the Nouvelle Vague. She was also a singer with genuine hits, a novelist, a director of personal, searching films, a stage actress, a collaborator with younger musicians and filmmakers. She lived long enough to see her own image turned into posters, tributes, and festival banners, and to smile at it, knowing the distance between the myth and the women. "People say icon," she once said, "but I'm just an actress who had a lot of luck, good and bad." Once a child, she dreamed of drama school and was told she'd have to wait until 21. She didn't wait. She ran away instead and taught herself in the dark, watching films over and over until the language made sense. Anna Karina never entirely stopped running toward the movies, and in return, the movies never stopped holding on to her. In cigarettes and soap bubbles, in bold colors and grainy black and white, in songs under the sun, and in the unforgettable look straight into the lens, where the girl from Copenhagen and the icon of the new wave briefly become the same person. So that is it for today's video. That is it for the life of Anna Karina. This was such an interesting video for me to make because I adore her. I got my hair cut like hers several times before moving into a more Marianne Faithfull look. I adore her. To me, she's one of the most beautiful women there ever was and there ever will be. And also, she was such a great actress. And her love story with Godard makes this so interesting because what these two created is still so important in modern film history. Now on to the giveaway. If you want to win the tights, all you have to do is be subscribed to my channel, give this video a thumbs up, then on December 26th, I will draw all the names and make a post about it. You can enter every single day for every single giveaway. That if you've already won one thing, I'm gonna withdraw your name the other day so that 25 people can have 25 little gifts. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I would love you to give it a thumbs up and maybe even share it with a friend. It supports me, it supports the channel, and it would truly mean the world. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing. There are still more episodes coming. On the days that I don't do these videos, I also do vlogs, so maybe that is something you want to check out. And in general, if you are interested in the 60s and 70s, you might have a good time on my channel. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine. Take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, dolls!